Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello and welcome to Focus on Health. I'm your host, Peggy Mello. Today's guests are Lisa Buenau from the Cornell Cooperative Extension of Albany County and Sue Vanderwarker from EcoSure. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Thank you.
Lisa, why don't you begin and talk about what you do?
Well, I work for Cornell Cooperative Extension of Albany County as a nutrition educator. And we present programming to the community on a variety of nutrition and food-related topics.
Okay. Sue.
I work for EcoSure, and EcoSure is a company that offers advanced QA solutions for industry with regards to food safety, workplace safety, and consumer relations.
Okay. So you teach restaurants how to handle their food and basically how to pass inspection, right?
Yes.
Okay, very good. There is so much to cover on germs. We could be here for hours and hours, but why don't we just start with an introduction? Do you want to begin, Lisa?
Sure. The United States has the safest food supply in the world, but yet 76 million Americans will become infected with a foodborne illness this year. And in fact, 5,000 of these people will die from it. So it's definitely a public safety concern.
Mm-hmm. And Sue, do you want to talk about the introduction to bacteria statistics? How quick do they multiply?
Well, in the right conditions, which would be in the middle of the danger zone, which would be room temperature would suffice as the middle of the danger zone, bacteria can double every 20 minutes. So it's very important to make sure that you keep your cold stuff cold and your hot stuff hot and out of the middle of the danger zone.
Okay. And for food safety, germs, can you see a germ? Can you smell a germ? Can you taste a germ?
Not necessarily. You can smell some foods that have spoiled, but for the most part, you can't see the bacteria that invade your food.
Okay, and it can be in anything. So we're not just talking meat and fish. We're talking vegetables, fruit.
Absolutely.
Everything. Anything you put in your mouth, pretty much.
Pretty much.
Who is the high-risk population?
The high-risk population are those that are immune compromised in some way, and specifically the elderly and young children.
Anyone on certain medications as well. Pregnant women, too, fall in the high-risk category as well.
Okay, and the types of germs, do you want to just do the two classifications?
When we talk about foodborne illness, we're really talking about bacteria or viruses.
Mm-hmm.
And we see both of them as culprits for outbreaks.
Mm-hmm. And in the home environment, why is it so easy for something to pass from one person to another?
Well, I think in a home situation, you're close to one another. We do things at home that they don't do in restaurants, like share a common towel in the bathroom, in the kitchen.
Right.
And when you are sharing items like that, the chance of you passing the bacteria or virus back and forth to each other is greater.
Mm-hmm. I think what some people don't know is the difference between restaurant preparation and home preparation. For instance, you're telling me restaurants do not use dish towels, right?
No, they will use, they have dishwashers that actually will go through and the dishes air dry as opposed to being dried by hand or dried with towels,
right.
Something that we commonly do at home. And I think the difference is that we need to think about is that restaurants have rules. They're regulated, they're inspected, and when they're handling food, they have rules that they need to follow. At home, nobody is policing you and how you handle your food. So
right.
There are things that we commonly do at home that you would be a major violation for a restaurant to do. And you don't even
right.
think about it.
Because we never get inspected, do we?
No.
Okay. Why is a potluck environment so scary?
Well, for me, that would be something that would be scary for that reason, that you don't go into people's homes and see how they handle food. Sometimes they let the kids help, and sometimes, you know, I know we're going to talk a little bit later about your animals in your house. You know, if you have a cat, where's your cat all day? Are they on your counter while you're at work? And do you sanitize your countertop before you start preparing your meal?
Right.
So there's a lot of things that, and there's animals aren't allowed in restaurants, so you know, you don't. There's one aspect that you wouldn't have in a restaurant that you would have at home. So there are things that I just don't think that we think about, because we would clean our kitchen up at night, and it looks clean, and we put the sponge on the side of the counter, and it sits there overnight or for several days, depending. And we don't have it in sanitizer. We don't follow the rules that the restaurants have in place.
But do you think there's a mentality where people almost feel that they're safer?
Definitely.
That the restaurant procedures don't necessarily need to be followed in a home environment?
Yes, I would say that that's probably, that is accurate. I think people think that it's safer to eat at home than to eat at a restaurant, and I don't think that's necessarily true.
Right.
But people that thaw their chicken on the counter all day and never use the thermometer to check temperatures of their food, and
right.
You know, have all these other things going on. If they get a foodborne illness, they automatically think about where they ate out last, because nobody gives themselves food poisoning, or their family.
Now,
right?
But when do the symptoms start?
Well, it depends, because you can get sick anywhere from 20 minutes after you eat food up to 6 weeks later.
Right. So you don't really know where it came from.
No,
right?
you don't.
So you can't
it's very
blame
hard to
the place
pinpoint.
that you ate last night.
No, and I think we all do that, because whenever you throw up after you eat something, especially you throw up the last thing you ate, you think that's what got you sick, and it's not necessarily true. So it makes it a little bit challenging to find what the culprit was, actually.
A lot of investigation.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Lisa, do you want to talk about the main points to the BAC program, the
Right.
Fight Back program?
Sure. The Partnership for Food Safety Education developed a campaign some years ago to guide the consumer to keep their food safe, and it's called Fight Back, and it's fight bacteria. And there are 4 simple principles that if we can remember to follow, we'll be well on our way to keeping our foodborne illness out of our homes. And that's clean, separate, cook, and chill.
Okay, so let's start with clean.
Clean. Wash your hands before and after you handle food. Keep your utensils and your cutting surfaces clean at all times.
Okay. Sue, let's go into the specifics. Number 1, tips on hand washing. How do we wash our hands?
Well,
how do we not wash our hands?
When you wash your hands, you want to be washing for at least 20 seconds. So you want to use water as hot as you can comfortably stand, and you want to really lather up well. Usually they say lather about 10 to 15 seconds. I know a lot of times we'll teach people that if you can sing happy birthday to yourself twice, that's about 20 seconds. So you know how long you should actually be doing it for. People in general are not great hand washers, and all you have to do is go to a public restroom and look around while you're washing your own hands to see that people don't often do it for very long.
And is just water enough, or
you need to use soap?
You need to use soap.
You need to actually scrub, because it's the scrubbing that gets the bacteria off the hands. So you need to vigorously lather your hands to wash them off.
All right. Now, cleaning surfaces. How do you do it, and when do you do it?
Well, if you have animals in the house, I would definitely make sure that you clean and sanitize your work surfaces before you start. And there's many products out there. You can either make your own solution, which would be USDA recommends a teaspoon of bleach to a quart of water.
Okay. So just put in a spray bottle or something, right?
Yes. There are also commercial products out there, sanitizers that you would spray the surface and you leave it on there. There's some that you can leave on. There's some that you wipe off. I think the key with that is to make sure that you read the back of the bottle, because a lot of the sanitizers need to stay in contact with the surface for a certain amount of time before you wipe them off. And it can be 30 seconds, it could be 2 minutes, it depends on the sanitizer. So always make sure that you read the product
Okay. And what product should we wipe with?
A clean, dry towel or a single-use paper towel.
Okay. And what do you do with the towel once you've used it?
Well, if you've used it to wipe off, if you sanitize, then you would throw it out, or not throw it out. Well, if it's a dish towel, you would put it in the laundry and wash it in hot water.
Hot water only.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And then after you've prepared food, right? Do the same thing?
Yes, after if you've had say you're cutting up chicken. When you get done cutting up the chicken, you would want to make sure that you wash and rinse and sanitize the area that you just worked on, so that you don't end up spreading the chicken juice all over your kitchen. So you want to be careful with that. So if you worked on a cutting board, make sure that you wash that, the countertop underneath, whatever utensils that you used. You want to make sure that you're thinking about everything that you've touched while you were preparing that, and wash your hands well after as well.
I think that people don't really think about the fact that the sponge is touching everything dirty and then not being washed afterwards. They don't assume that, they don't realize that germs are on sponges, I think. So
Yes.
what's your tips about sponges?
Well, with sponges, there's actually several things out there that you can do with them. You can either soak them in a bleach solution. There's also the recommendation of microwaving your sponge for a minute in the microwave. There's several different things that you can do. Wash it in the dishwasher as long as you have the heat cycle on. That also removes a lot of the germs and bacteria out of the sponge. But you definitely want to do something with it when you're done with it.
Now, what needs to be washed or rinsed before you eat it? Do you have to rinse a chicken in the sink before you cut it up and prepare it?
Yeah, the recommendation now is that you don't rinse your meats before you prepare them. And I think part of that recommendation has to do with the fact that there's so much more of a chance of cross-contamination. If you rinse that meat in the sink and then you don't sanitize your sink afterwards, and now you take a head of lettuce and you're washing your lettuce in the sink, you drop a piece and you pick it up, you might have contaminated that as well. So you want to really make sure that you're careful when you're doing that. But the recommendation now is that you don't rinse your meats, that you use them direct from the packaging. Now, your fruits and vegetables, that you would definitely want to wash. Either wash just in warm water or use one of those vegetable brushes and just scrub it a little bit. Don't use detergent, don't use sanitizer on the food itself, but just vigorously scrubbing with a brush and water.
So it doesn't matter if you're peeling it or if it's something that has like an orange that you're peeling the outside layer off, you still have to wash it,
Well,
right?
think about it for a second. When you go to the grocery store and you go to pick your oranges, if they're out, not already bagged, you pick them up, you put them down, you pick up another one, you put it down. It's been touched many times. You also don't know what pesticides are on there.
Right.
Same with bananas too. So now you go to open it up and you peel it, you put the peel aside and you haven't washed your hands, and now you're touching the part, the inside, which is now going to go into your mouth. So you definitely want to wash off the outside of a fruit before you peel it as well.
Okay, so next we do separate.
Separate, don't cross-contaminate. Keep your meat, fish, and poultry separate from your ready-to-eat foods at all times, from the grocery cart to the dinner table.
So storage-wise, where does the meat and seafood have to be?
Separate from where your produce will be. So if many refrigerators now have a meat compartment on the very bottom of the refrigerator and the produce is above it. Because if it were the opposite and the meat, fish, or poultry were above the produce, drippings could easily fall down and contaminate our produce, which is ready to eat for the most part.
And that's unfortunately the way most refrigerators are set up. Your crispers are on the bottom. So when you come home from the grocery store, you automatically put your meat on the shelf that's above this. And you really want to make sure that you're careful with that you have it in some kind of container, if that's the way your refrigerator is set up, so it doesn't drip on your ready-to-eat foods. If you were a restaurant and you had in your cooler, if you have your chicken placed above your salad greens or anything ready to eat, it's a major violation. And it's something that we routinely do at home just because the home refrigerator is not set up properly.
Now, let's go back to the supermarket environment for a second.
Okay.
I know that they have the separate bags that you can put the meat into, but is that enough of a safeguard, or do you also need it bagged separately to take it home?
Well, I think I've noticed when I've gone to the grocery store that the baggers really have a good idea nowadays of making sure that they separate your meats from your ready-to-eat foods. But you want to watch that. Yes, you definitely want to make sure that the chicken is not in the same bag as your celery. You want to make sure that your meats are separated. And so that's good. Also, when you place them in the cart as well, you want to make sure that you're not putting your vegetables on top of your chicken, that you have it separate. Sometimes I even put the chicken package on the bottom shelf of my cart if I've got a lot of stuff that I want to buy, and that package looks particularly juicy because you know that it's just got the cellophane wrap over it, and sometimes they drip quite a bit. So you want to make sure that you're not dripping on your ready-to-eat foods.
So is it safe to assume that we have to assume that everything has bacteria on it? Let's say the grocery cart, for instance.
Yes, and I think that the grocery cart actually made the top 10 list of germiest places that handles it. You really want to make sure that that you're separating, and you want to make sure that you're just careful with your food, and assume that it is contaminated. That's the best way to do it. Because unfortunately, you don't know.
Right.
And if the good thing and the bad thing about foodborne illness is that you don't get sick every day. On one hand, if you did get sick every time you mishandled food, you'd never mishandle food. But you can eat a rare hamburger and not get E. coli, and you can eat your chicken and get to the bone and the whole area is pink and you didn't cook it and not get sick from salmonella. But you don't know. It's a crapshoot. You can't smell it. You can't taste it. You don't know. So you're taking a chance every single time you don't cook things properly or handle things properly. And we have, if you're a healthy adult, you have a good immune system. A lot of times you eat bacteria and it just passes through and your system kills it and it's not a problem. But you can't be sure that, if you want to take that chance, that's really your decision. But you really want to make sure that you're doing the best for your family to keep yourself and your family safe from getting something.
Now let's talk about chicken. What percentage or how predominant is bacteria in chicken?
There's a good percentage of chicken that comes in with some kind of bacteria on it. So especially with the chicken, you want to be careful. You want to make sure, and it's also in the packaging that leaks quite often. So you really want to make sure that you're really careful handling your chicken from the time you buy it to the time you prepare it and get it into the oven, and that you cook it to the proper temperatures too.
So let's talk about food preparation. So for instance, I'm going to start getting ready to cook in the kitchen. What do I have to do? Let's say I'm going to make a meatloaf, and I've got the ground beef, and I've got the eggs, and I've got the veggies to put in the meatloaf.
Okay.
What do I have to do before I do anything?
I would get everything out that you need so that you don't start putting your hands in the ground beef and then have to go to the cabinet and grab the spices and pour it in. You want to have everything ready so that anything that you end up having to touch with your hands full of the ground beef is something that is then going to be washed, which you don't necessarily do with a bottle of, that's got spices in it. You don't clean and sanitize that after you've touched it. So you want to make sure that you get your spices out and ready to go, and that you get your meatloaf prepared, and make sure that you wash your hands off before you open that oven door, or sanitize the oven door afterwards. But those are the kinds of things that you need to think. Just think ahead. Think about what it is you're doing. Sometimes you can, I know if I forget to add something in, I'll call somebody from the other room and say, hey, can you come put some more breadcrumbs in here? My hands are full of meat. So, to ask for some assistance too, just to be on the safe side.
That's very, very good. So what about cutting boards? What do we need to worry about with cutting boards?
Well, you just want to make sure, like Lisa said, that you separate. When you're cutting on a cutting board, you wouldn't want to cut up your chicken and flip it over to the other side and then cut your vegetables on there. You want to make sure that you can do two things. You either have separate cutting boards, have a cutting board that's dedicated just to raw meats, and then have one that's for ready-to-eat foods, or just make sure that you wash, rinse, and sanitize the cutting board between tasks so that you don't cross-contaminate the juice from the chicken to your salad.
So what about a barbecuing scenario? Let's say you bring the plate of raw meat out. What do you have to
Another
do?
good example. If you bring out a plate of raw meat to the grill, make sure that you either go wash, rinse, and sanitize that plate before you put the cooked product on there, because if there's anything in the juice of the raw product, you can then get it, on your cooked product. So you want to make sure that you would bring out a fresh plate, or, like I said, wash, rinse, and sanitize it before you use it again for the cooked food.
Okay. Lisa, the next concept of cook. Do you want to describe that?
Cooking food safely means cooking food to a high enough temperature for a long enough period of time to kill bacteria.
Okay. So, further definition. What kind of thermometers are there? What can we use?
Your kitchen, the probe thermometer, or any of the kitchen thermometers that you might use, are probably the most, I think they're the most important piece of equipment that you have, because it's the only way to properly tell if your food is cooked to the right temperature. They make digital ones, or thermocouples, whatever you use, you need to use it, and you want to make sure that it's calibrated properly as well. But it depends on what the food item is. Everything's got a different cook temperature. So that is something that you would probably want to, I know we've got a website there that you mentioned.
Yeah,
that,
we can mention it, fightbac.org.
Right.
Fightbac.org.
Actually, any of the government websites, USDA.gov, FDA.gov, CDC website, also very good. Go to the food safety section, and you can actually print out charts that would tell you proper cook temperatures for each food, whether, because chicken has a higher cook temperature than a hamburger does, hamburger has a higher cook temperature than a steak does. So you really want to know, what temperature it needs to be, because if you actually use the thermometer, you don't have to cook your hamburgers to their hockey pucks to make sure that they're done. You actually get a pretty good quality piece of meat if you take the temperature, as opposed to overcooking, which a lot of people do now. They tend to overcook their food because they want to make sure it's done. Meanwhile, it tastes like leather. So there's a happy medium in between, but this is the key, is actually using a thermometer.
Now, are there only guidelines, let's say, just for meat and fish, or does it go further in depth?
It does. There's guidelines for commercially prepared, fully cooked food. There's a different temperature when you go to heat those up. You don't have to heat them up quite as hot as you would if you had cooked something yourself, cooled it down and reheated it, and that temperature is a different temperature as well. So it's important to know, and it's a good thing to look up. You can cut it out and paste it right on your refrigerator and have it right there for you.
So what about temperatures for the refrigerator and freezer? What should they be at?
Well, your freezer, you want about 0 degrees, at least 0. And for your refrigerator, you want it to set it at 40, so you want it to stay at below 41. So 40 and below is good. And most people don't actually have a thermometer in their refrigerator either. Usually they tell whether or not it's cold enough for them if there's ice crystals in their milk, or their lettuce froze, and that's usually the guide. But you really should, in order to again make sure that you're at a proper temperature, just get a thermometer at the grocery store, or any of the department stores. You can get them and put it in there and actually monitor that and keep it below 40 degrees.
Okay, now what about tips on cooking bacteria out of food? How do we do that?
Well, you want to cook food to the proper temperature. There are some bacteria that can get on food that you actually can't cook out of food, so proper food handling is important, which is when you go to especially we'll see that with fish. If fish is time temperature abuse, depending on what the fish is, you can actually grow enough bacteria on there that you can't cook it out. So you want to really make sure when you're going to the grocery store, that should be your last stop before you go home. Right. Not go to the grocery store, go to the fish market, then pick the kids up from soccer and go to the dry cleaners and 6 other errands. You really want to make sure, and especially in the summer when it's 90 degrees out, you want to make sure that you when you purchase your food, that you're able to get it home quickly and into the refrigerator.
So we shouldn't go to the movies after we go to a restaurant with the leftovers in the
No,
car,
that's
right?
another thing too. The doggy bag. I think the USDA guideline for that is 2 hours from the time something is served to you get it in the refrigerator. That you want to use that as a rule of thumb. If you're not going to be home and in a place where it can be refrigerated in under 2 hours, then you shouldn't take it home. And if it's a hot day out, if it's over, what was that?
If it's around 90 degrees, it should be no more than 1 hour.
So it doesn't give you a lot of time. So, but you want to keep it. You want it to be safe.
And we cannot depend on the air conditioning in our car to be a refrigeration method, right?
No, never gets that cold in there.
Okay. What about shelf life of items? When is something past its prime in the refrigerator and in the freezer?
Well, I think most foods now are dated with an expiration date on it, or a use by or sell by date, and then depending on what the food is, that's going to vary too. And that's another chart that you can actually get from any of those websites that tells you how long something can be kept in the refrigerator. I think they recommend for deli meats 3 to 5 days. It depends on really what it is.
What it is.
If you open cottage cheese, that has a different one. Open carton of milk, whatever it is. But you should know what they are. There's not one blanket, okay, you can keep everything for a week or until it gets fuzzy. You just really should know what it is. And that way you're not throwing out stuff that's still good and eating stuff that's spoiled.
What about defrosting? What is the best way of defrosting something?
The best method of defrosting is in the refrigerator.
Okay.
Now, having said that, sometimes we don't leave enough time to defrost something before we need it.
Yeah.
So the other methods that you can use is actually thawing it in. You would put it in a make sure that's in an airtight seal, and then put it in water and in a pot and let water run on it. If the water is no hotter than 70 degrees, you don't want hot water running on it. But you can thaw it that way. You can thaw it in the microwave as well, only if you're going to continue cooking it immediately. Because in the microwave, as you know, part of the food item actually gets cooked, and the other part might still be frozen. So because it defrosts so unevenly, you're actually bringing part of that product into the danger zone, where bacteria will multiply quickly when the rest of it is still frozen. So if microwaving is okay as long as you continue the cooking process immediately afterwards.
Oh my God, I forgot what was I going to say? Okay, now I remember. So, okay, so what you're saying is that we can't leave something out on the counter all day long while we're at work, right?
Right.
Okay, very unsafe.
Very unsafe. Very unsafe.
Okay. All right, and the last is chill. Do you want to talk about chill?
Chill. Keep cold foods cold. And as Sue mentioned, leftovers should be back in the refrigerator no more than 2 hours after a meal is served.
Okay.
And you want to be particularly careful for the outdoor barbecue in the summertime. You know, if you're serving a cold item, you want to make sure that it's sitting in something that will keep it cold, or you want to get it back in the refrigerator within 1 hour.
Okay. Now, how is an overfilled refrigerator dangerous?
Well, the way a refrigerator works and keeps food cold is you have the air circulating around. And if you jam that refrigerator full of food, you don't get that air circulation. So you're not going to have food kept as cold in there. The other thing that you don't ever want to do is put something hot into the refrigerator. You want to actively cool it first before you put it away. Because if you put something hot into the refrigerator, then you're bringing up the air temperature, and actually the food surrounding that item is actually going to come up into the danger zone while this other item is chilling down. So you always want to cool something off ahead of time before you put it into the refrigerator.
So let's say you just made a batch of soup, and it's very hot, and you ate it, and it's still very hot, but you don't want bacteria to accumulate in it while it's cooling down. So how do you do it?
Well, one method is you can fill your sink with ice and actually put the pot into the middle of the ice and then stir it so it's cooling from the outside in. You also want to put it into smaller containers so that it's not so deep, because a big pot of soup is not going to cool down very quickly. So if you separate it into smaller containers that aren't very deep, you have more surface area for the heat to escape.
Okay.
And then cool it down for maybe 15-20 minutes on your counter, and then put it into the refrigerator. But you don't want to put anything in hot into the refrigerator.
Okay. All right, and we've already talked about the concept of the temperature of the refrigerator.
Right, you want to
Which
make
is
sure that
important, right?
stays 40 degrees or below.
Okay. And then the last thing was the takeout food, the refrigeration of that.
Yes, if you're not going to go right home after you're done eating your meal, then don't bring it home, unless you have a cooler in your car with ice or some kind of refrigerant in it.
Okay.
That way you could save it, but you want to be on the safe side. And again, we take that risk because not every time, I'm sure everybody at one point has left something sitting in their car and it was a really good meal and they think, oh, it's all right, and reheat it and it's okay. And that might be okay many times, but again, if you're, especially people that are in the high-risk population, you don't ever want to take a chance like that. It's just not worth it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Lisa, the review of the 4 concepts.
4 principles: clean, separate, cook, and chill.
Okay. And for further information, do you want to talk about websites that people can go to?
They can always call Cornell Cooperative Extension of Albany County's Cornell Cooperative Extension of Albany County's Consumer Hotline at 765-3500. Or there's information on the web, USDA.gov or FDA.gov or fightback.org.
Okay. Thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks for watching. We hope to see you next time on Focus on Health.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.